Hey everybody, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me today. We're going to be talking about measuring for B2B engagement. How many of you are in B2B companies? Oh, awesome. A lot of you. Great. So that's what this talk is about. And which basically means what data you should be thinking about collecting for your SaaS startup. A little bit about me. I'm Diana. I head up marketing at a company called Segment. For a very little bit about us, we make it easy to install growth tools and analytics tools. So instead of installing these directly into your website or into your mobile app, you can send all your data to us once, and then we'll transform it and send it off to any tool that you want to use. But enough about me. We're all here to talk about growth today, and we've been talking about a lot of different ways that you can grow your company: analytics, email and push. We were just talking about that, and like the connections, which is really cool. Advertising, optimization, this was a really hot topic today, support. But before you can use any of these tools for growth, you really have to think about what data you're going to send them. How are you going to make them useful, like the actual building blocks, before you can do any of this cool stuff? And I'm here to tell you a little secret, and that is that all of these tools run on exactly the same data. What do you mean? What are you talking about? How does this work? So let's start with thinking about a typical analytics funnel. Someone comes to your site, they do something else, they drop off, then they do something else, they drop off again. So this is kind of what ours look like: signed up, data sent when people integrate into our website, and then subscription started. So to get people to sign up in the first place, you might use advertising or live support. But to see if you actually did a good job of that, you have to take that sign up customer interaction and pipe that back up into your advertising tool. Similarly, if you want to activate users to get them from signed up to integrating your SaaS startup or company, you might do A/B testing, you might do email, and to see if those worked, you have to pipe that conversion event back up into those tools, and similarly for subscription started. So now that you can see that they're all kind of working with similar data, what we really suggest is decide what you want to track once, because this is going to save you tons of time down the road. So if you think about like what these core events are in the beginning, you'll have clean and consistent data across all of your tools, and your whole team will be on the same page about what the data is that you're even talking about when you're using these different tools. The key to doing this really well is what we call a tracking plan. So a tracking plan is a document that outlines what are the events, the customer interactions that you're sending or that you're collecting. Why are you even measuring them in the first place? What properties are associated with them? And where are you going to like fire these different things off? Eventually, you'll use your tracking plan and put it into code. It's kind of an example of what that might look like. And that will send off these different events to your tools. And for example, that might look like in an email tool, creating a segment of users based on events that they have taken and properties that they have to send an email. So how do you create this tracking plan that's going to make all this a lot better for you? There are three main portions or ways to do this, or steps. First is defining a naming convention, carefully selecting the events that you're going to collect, and then putting the details in the properties. So let us start with defining a naming convention. You may be surprised just how many ways there are to explain the same customer event. Say you want to figure out what a sign-up is. Someone might call it account created. Someone might call it new user. Someone might call it started account. There's a million different ways to do this. And what this means for you is that if different developers did this at different times in your company, you might go into one of your tools and see a drop-down menu that looks like this, and you have no idea what you're actually supposed to choose for the sign-up event. And this is really annoying and not really an ideal situation. So instead, we really suggest defining a naming convention, like how are you going to name all these events and making it consistent. This seems really simple, but very few people actually do this. So object action is a great way to think about it. For example, subscription started. This is probably relevant for you guys in the SaaS world. And the way that you want to start brainstorming what events you might track is think about the objects that users interact with in your site. For Segment, that's integrations. For the different recipe sites, that might be recipes. For 8-tracks, that might be songs and playlists. And then what do people do with those objects? How can they interact with them? So project created, deleted, merged, subscription started, upgraded, downgraded. These are probably important for you. And however you decide to name it, the most important thing is to choose one way. And the great thing about the object action framework is that if you were going to analyze a bunch of different events about the same sort of piece of your product, it would be really easy to find all of those in the same place. Okay, Now you're all organized. You know how you're going to name your events. The next thing you have to do is carefully select which events you're actually going to capture and track. A common mistake that we see very, very often is for people to track everything. They want to track all their data. They want to track this click, this whatever. They want to track everything. And the problem with this is that you have no idea what's important when you go to do the analysis. There's just like too much stuff, too much noise. You can't focus on what you're actually trying to accomplish. So we suggest that you question why you're tracking every single event. Like, what is this going to do for you in the end? Is it going to help you answer some question that you have? And really, you should only start with 3 events. I know this seems a little extreme, but seriously, only start with 3 events to track. You may have brainstormed all these different events in the beginning, but you want to only take the 3 most important events that show how your users interact with your product. So this is like a framework to think about which events you should be capturing. The first is a discovery event. How do people raise their hand and say, I'm interested in your product? A sign up, a newsletter, whatever that event is for you. How do they engage with it? So you might have a lot of features. What is your top feature and how do they engage with it? This would also help you eventually build metrics like activation and that kind of stuff. Lastly, convert. Did they give you money? This is obviously important. I don't need to tell you why. So some examples. For segment, our core events look like signed up, data sent, subscription started. For Optimizely, it might look like signed up, experiment created. Those are the object actions, subscription started. For Slack, message sent, seems like a good event for them. You might also have some other events that you're interested in tracking. For example, Slack might want to track chat groups created and integrations connected because they might, talk about engagement or retention. And that's okay, but really try to stick to 3 to 5. Just stick with the core things. And the other important thing to think about here is that you want to be tracking the same events across your mobile web app, or your mobile app and your website. So you should have a similar experience across both of these tools. And the events ring true on both ways. And if you name them the same thing, it's going to be way easier for you to analyze at a top level, how are people interacting differently across these different devices. Okay. You may be wondering, what about pre-sign-up events? What about all the marketing stuff that goes into play? I'd suggest that for before sign-up, you just use page tracking in Google Analytics for if you're just starting out, that's totally works. And then the important thing there is that conversion event, that first discovery event, which is what you'll already be tracking with the other framework. Okay, you have your 3 precious events. You know which ones they are, which ones are important. How do you get the most out of these events? It doesn't seem like very many. And the answer to that is to put the details in the properties of the events. What traits do you send along with each event? And let me kind of explain what this means. It's a little bit confusing. So let's start with a question you might all have. How many new subscriptions do we have today? What are our most popular plans? These are good questions to ask. And to actually answer those questions, you need to track an event that's a little bit broad. Like I mentioned, I keep bringing this back, subscription started. But where the properties come into play is where you can track whether that's a business or a user account. You can track what the name is of the subscription, what the value is of it. If you're tracking subscription upgraded, you might want to see what was their previous plan and pass that along as well. We commonly see people tracking events with really specific names, way too specific. We see clicked blue sign up button. This stuff isn't actually useful for you if you want to do roll-up analysis. So for example, people might track, different events for every single different type of plan they have, and that's actually not useful for you. So don't do that. Think about the most abstracted event you can think of, and by doing it this way, you can really do a lot of analysis with just a single, analyzing a single event. For example, with the way that I just talked about tracking it, you could figure out, how do our user and group accounts shake out across all of our different plans? That's a single event, all of that data. Also, you can look at over time, how is the composition of our plans changing? You probably want more enterprise to make more money. And then you could come up with ideas for optimization and how do you benchmark that and improve that. So to wrap it all up, you want to think about your data first before you start using any of these tools or before you can even think about tracking metrics for investors, optimizing growth. You have to know what these key events are that will build on all those other things, you're going to be using a lot of these tools. So it just makes sense for you to take the time to think through what events are important from the beginning. Like, what is your key thing? Because then you'll be able to move way faster. You don't have to start from scratch every time you want to build a new tool. Maybe you're like you didn't launch it, and you like figure out your core events, and then eventually you'll add emails, but it's the same thing. So you don't have to waste your headspace on that. And you also have clean and consistent data across all your platforms. You know if you're creating an ad campaign that your sign-up conversion event is the same as on all these different platforms. And the other great thing about this is that if you document how you name your events and what it is that they're tracking, your whole team will be on the same page, and they'll be able to go off and do things with the analysis because they know exactly what the data is talking about. And this is a surprisingly huge problem that you guys can avoid by just thinking about this from the beginning and achieve growth. So thanks so much. I'm Diana. We can open it up for questions. And also, if you're interested in more of the tracking plan stuff, if you go to this link, you can find segment.com/WMD. You can find downloadable templates that I saw with that gives you the kind of grid of what you should be thinking about, what you should fill out for all of your tracking. Yeah, so I will open it up to questions. One question. Okay. There is someone in the back. Yes.
So we've been using Segment for about a month or so, and we're sort of at the moment just throwing stuff in there. Two really quick things. The first one, you mentioned using Google Analytics primarily as your before or pre-identification phase when they're just a random browser somewhere clicking around.
Yeah.
What's the technique for then correlating that random browser to be a known entity once they eventually fill out a form and there's somebody? Is that something you guys take care of, or do we have to handle that? And then I guess the second piece was with those charts you showed, is Segment really designed, or is the product orientated towards being a reporting platform or a repository to then connect other reporting platforms into?
Great question. I'm going to start with the second one. So Segment is purely just like a layer of data collection in between all of your tools. So with Segment, you wouldn't be able to create those types of graphs that I'm talking about. You would create those in Google Analytics, or you can do it in Google Analytics as well, but like in Kissmetrics or Mixpanel or Indicative or any of these analytics tools. So we're purely just like you pass the data to us and we pass it out to wherever it is that you're going to use it. So we don't want to be a reporting tool. That's not kind of what we do. The second piece is it depends what your goals are for the tracking the different users across, from like anonymous to logged in. With Segment, we kind of take care of how giving people an ID that connects them across. If you're really concerned about like logged in and logged out users, Kissmetrics is actually a pretty good option for you if that's something that you're worried about, and like figuring out how to tie the users together. But we cover that under the covers. I think that's all the questions that we have. Thanks so much. And then if you have any other questions, email me or chat with me after. Thanks.